Welcome Brandeis parents to our From College to Career webinar, a webinar especially for parents of sophomores and juniors. This is sponsored by the Hiatt Career Center at Brandeis. My name is Alexandra Stephens and I'm the Associate Director of Career Programs and Engagement here at the Hiatt Career Center, and I will be moderating our discussion today and taking all of your wonderful questions. Please know that the webinar will be recorded and posted online for later viewing. And also please use your question box in the GoToWebinar control panel to submit questions throughout the presentation as you think of them. And we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the broadcast. I'm excited to introduce to you our speaker for today, who is Andrea Dine, the Executive Director of the Hiatt Career Center here at Brandeis. Andrea is a nationally respected Career Center director with over 20 years of experience in the field. She's passionate about leading a team to create innovative, student-focused, outcomes-oriented resources and services, and is honored to lead our team here at the Hiatt Career Center. And we're committed to innovation and the pursuit of excellence. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
Both reporting here from my office, and we're so happy to be with all of you.
Well, thank you, Alexandra. And if only I could share some of the lovely 60-degree weather we're having here in Waltham, I would send lovely also the changing of the color of the leaves to everyone on the call. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you for being invested in your students' pursuits and future success. That being said, I'd like to set the stage a little bit about what the Hiatt Career Center does. We are an office that serves undergraduate students, and we serve them while they're students, and we serve them for the rest of their lives as well. We are full service to alumni, which is very exciting. I'd also like to note, I want to thank people who submitted questions in advance of the webinar. I have incorporated many of your questions in the presentation today. And I also wanted to give a referral as well. There were several folks that submitted questions in advance that were very specific questions about medical school itself. I would like you to know that we do have a specialist office at Brandeis University called the Pre-Health Office, and that office works quite extensively with students as they prepare to attend medical school or pursue medical school, as well as other health careers. So for those of you that have questions, very specific questions about the MCATs, for example, or the trajectory that students follow in the coursework they take to pursue medical school, I would like you to refer you to that specialized office, as that is their full-time job. They have 3 staff members working with students to help them pursue medical school. So I'd like you to know that they exist. That being said, we're going to kind of jump into our conversation today. The agenda today is really to take a look at, I'll go briefly through the current job climate. We're very fortunate that the economy has swung, and we're actually now seeing really exciting things and results of that and outcomes for that within the student body. We've actually recently been working with several seniors on offer negotiation between multiple offices, and we haven't seen that as frequently as we are seeing it now in some time, which is lovely. So we'll talk about that current job climate and address some of the headlines you may be seeing in the news. Then we're going to go more specifically into Hiatt's focus on students, how we work with students and alumni, what our approach is, and things you should know to help your students, and looking at that also by class year. So what are different things? Now, again, parents on this call are presumably parents of sophomores and juniors, and so we'll take a look at sort of what is the developmental process for students that are at that stage in their college career, and how you can be helpful in that particular setting. We'll start off by really addressing sort of what career centers used to be and what they are today. And with that, I have a first question for you about the frequency in which you used your career center.
So we're going to launch our first poll. It's going to appear on your screen. And the question is, how often did you visit your college career center as an undergraduate? Pretty easy question, never, once, or more than once. And so we'll just give you a few more seconds to weigh in. We'd love to get 100% participation here. And then we'll share the results with you. So we'll give you 5 more seconds. Popped right up on your screen there. Fill out that little radio button. And we're going to go ahead and close the poll and share those results. So Andrea, about a third never, a handful once, 60% more than once. Good doobies on this
Right,
call.
impressed.
All right.
All right, so given that picture, so there's a significant percentage of folks on the call who, in fact, had engaged with their Career Center at least relatively frequently, at least more than once. I'm going to draw sort of the then and now. I actually pulled that as an actual photo of Hiatt Career Center in 1993, and I'll talk about that versus what things are like today. So often, and this may be your frame of reference given your generation, students were historically thinking about careers really their senior year. There was that matching piece that students got to senior year and said, oh, I should start thinking about what I should do after I graduate. The employers themselves had real expectations that they wanted to hire lovely, smart, intelligent people that could bring some basic skills to their organization. And they had extensive employee training programs to prep them for particular work roles within that organization. Students would, as you can see in the photo, go through binders and bulletin boards to actually find opportunities. There were also, if you remember back in the day of newspapers, things like classified ads that people would use to find opportunities. The other big difference between then and now is that, historically speaking, students were hired by very large organizations. So these large organizations would have extensive college recruiting teams that would go out to colleges and universities around the country, and they were very large. They could have hundreds of employees in that particular branch of the recruiting arm of a company and recruit students on campus in diverse locations. So a recruiter may have a few very large schools in their territory, or they might have a larger territory like New England. But in general, companies had an on-campus presence to do campus recruiting. Now it's very different. Oftentimes, students and parents are talking about careers and career interests even prior to applying to colleges, and that becomes a part of the decision-making process. Students certainly will be thinking potentially about career issues early in college, in part because employers are increasingly looking for college grads who have developed at least some basic professional skills within their field prior to graduation. And as you might imagine, that's a big shift. And so when we get to, and we will talk extensively about internships have gained importance and prominence in part because employers are expecting for skills prior to graduation. So that's a significant shift. The other big shift is, of course, the use of technology today. The very webinar we're having today would not have been possible back in 1993 for sure. I was trying to remember, one of my earlier roles in higher ed was coding for one of the first Career Center websites, and that was in the 90s, so that wasn't that long ago that Career Centers were even thinking about being on the World Wide Web, and that was before the web went commercial, and it was only government and educational institutions. So that's not that long ago, but as we know today, the impact of technology, the web, mobile devices, tablets, etc., is tremendous. And the way in which students access opportunities and reach out to organizations, and vice versa, the way organizations reach out to students has evolved tremendously, and that changes every day. So that's always, for me, a fun and exciting challenge, is to stay on top of those new innovations that then potentially have a tremendous impact on how employers and students find each other. The other major shift is vast majority of students are hired by medium to small organizations. And so though there are a few large companies that have recruiting teams, they are minuscule in the number of organizations that actually recruit and hire your students. And so the technology in some ways has fostered that opportunity for smaller and medium-sized organizations to be able to reach out top talent through those mediums to be able to recruit your students. But again, that's a shift in some ways away from sort of the historical visions of career fairs where an organization might come and hire 50 students from an institution, whereas now they might hire one or two, depending on the relationship between the organization and the employer. So again, tremendous shifts as we think about not only frequency of engagement, but the ways in which organizations work with the Career Center externally, but whether that's parents, alumni, employers, or students. And so that is a tremendous shift. The other piece in the news, there's all kinds of things you hear about in the news, and I feel like the pendulum keeps swinging. We'll hear sort of the dire news reports like, oh my goodness, students with liberal arts grads don't get jobs. I can assure you, and you're welcome to look at our extensive data about outcomes on our website. That's not an issue at Brandeis, but I'm always frustrated when I hear those headlines. And the reverse, these are headlines for the last few months. Now there really is a swing about the value of the liberal arts degree. And so you'll see tech firms are now focusing on recruiting liberal arts in particular and looking at sort of the value degree outcome, and also how satisfied people are with their professional careers. So those pieces all are coming together now. And so we're starting to see a swing in the headlines about the types of roles that students are pursuing and companies. That being said, as I mentioned before, excuse me, the outcomes for Brandeis students are quite good. We're actually just starting now our research for the class of 2015, but I have data to share with you for the class of 2014. So again, this pie chart that you see is a pretty normative pie chart for us. Give or take, maybe more or less students pursue graduate school in any particular year. It's usually around a third. As you can see here, a majority of our students pursue full-time employment after graduation. For those folks that are doing other things, they're really quite interesting when you dig deep in the data, as I do. So it's really everything from international travel, volunteerism, fellowships, people make aliyah, all kinds of things happen in that 3%. So it's the smallest number, but sort of interesting stories. And this data is all collected within 6 months of graduation. So we wrap up collection on December 31st each year. As you can see, diverse fields. So no surprise with liberal arts majors, they go into areas of their particular interest, which you can see here. Again, it's broken down in much greater detail, including what employers or graduate schools folks attend on our website. So if you go into About Hiatt and look at destination data, you can see this in much greater detail. But I wanted to give you just an overview today so you could see that really students do well, both for graduate school and in the workforce after graduation, to allay any concerns that you may have in particular. Our philosophy, so the way in which we approach working with students really is sort of a foundational approach of starting with who they are. So students, to be successful in any career, need to be able to clearly articulate their values, skills, interests, and strengths to employers and actually relate those in a way that is relatable to the employer. So I might share certain things, for example, about my professional background. If I were working with a technology organization, I might share very different aspects about my strengths and skills if I'm working in an educational or a management position. And that is students are often encouraged to list sort of what are their accomplishments and their strengths, and they come up with this laundry list that's very untailored. So we work a lot with students not only to identify those attributes about themselves, but to really consider their audience as they begin to craft and think about themselves as a professional and think about where they fit into the world of work. That next stage, so that's that reflection piece of who they are, we really work with them to uniquely with them as an individual, how does that match potentially in the world of work? Because as you know, we're all limited by the information we know, and students in particular find themselves struggling about how their strengths or skills fit into the world of work, because it's not a world they know a great deal about. Even though students might be able to quickly articulate, for example, what your professional role is, they may not be able to articulate, for example, the top 5 skills that you use every day in your work. And because we want to tie those skills together, that piece of having them really explore in depth and connect with alumni, et cetera, in fields that they're interested in, becomes very important as they try to map sort of what direction is most appropriate for them. The other component to that is building a suite of professional skills so that they can connect with employers and organizations successfully. So I talked a little bit about thinking about audience, and that's one of the earlier pieces we talk about with students, about sharing what you would say to one audience differently with what you would choose to share with another audience. That connection piece, students are very accustomed to writing in opinion papers or third-person research papers, but they're not accustomed to writing and advocating for themselves in marketing documents, for example, similar to resumes and cover letters, and in fact, if they're networking for an internship or job search as well. And so pulling those pieces together in application in professional skills is another key role that we have in the office in helping students move forward. And with that, I have a question for you. So I'm curious, when did you know what it was that you wanted to do professionally?
So we've just launched our second poll, so if you all can just take a moment to weigh in. At what age did you know what career you wanted to have for the rest of your life? Were you under 18, an early bird? Was it during your college years, perhaps 18 to 21, post-college? Are you still working on it? We'd love to have you weigh in here, and then we'll share the results, which are usually pretty fun. So I'll give you just 5 more seconds to weigh in, just a quick click of the button on your screen. You guys are active participators. I like this. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share those results with all of you. So Andrea, looks like 14% under 18, about a quarter were between 18 to 21. These are the people that went to their career center. This is good. 42%, mid-career time between 22 and 39. 14% still working on it. Love that honesty. I think we're all still working on it,
right? Very true.
Okay, thanks so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the folks. I don't know, I think I might still be working on it a little bit, though I've worked at a career field for a great long time. I myself would probably, for higher ed, be a little younger. I'd probably join maybe the 26%, but I certainly never imagined until I was in that 22 to 39 range that I wanted to work in career centers specifically. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to remind you periodically about those numbers. So for a majority of folks, the largest group really figured out what they wanted to do for a career in that 22 to 39 range. And that is very common, and that's still true today. And so your students, one of the things we emphasize, and that I emphasized when I did the presentation to first-year students, is the exploration piece of trying new things and really encouraging students to push themselves academically and professionally in ways that they've not tried before, in ways that might be a little scary for them because they're new and it's not something they've experienced before, can be very important, because that's where someone can find out either where their imagined career is not a match for them, and that certainly happens, or for those that really have no idea what they want to do, to try something they've not tried before that they think will be a good match, then further helps them build their story and narration about how they really would like to be engaged in the world of work. And that, as we all know, and certainly true for everyone, that's an evolving process. And the way you spend your time in your workplace today versus how you spent that 10 or 20 years ago might be very different as you've moved into different roles. And oftentimes we joke with alumni that come back for career counseling, they might look back today and think, oh, I kind of see my path, and that sort of makes sense how I went from job to job. That often was not the case when they were actually going through the process. They may have had experiences of being laid off from a job or relocating and changing careers, etc. And it might have felt quite stressful and uncertain at the time, and that stress was quite real, even though now when they look back at it, they might say things like, well, that was actually fortunate because I found this new opportunity that was a much better fit for me. And so know and expect that your student, as they go through that process as an undergraduate and afterwards, will go through that process as well of uncertainty, trying new things. I think it's as equally important for students to figure out the things that they don't want or don't like, or environments that aren't a match for them, as it is for those things that are positive for them. Because again, that helps narrow their decision making to make decisions more effectively, because they have more data upon which to make those decisions. But to give you an overview of specific things, and then I'll go into much greater depth moving forward, as I expect there's a lot of questions around internships and the like, I want to give you the overview of the timeline in general. So sophomore year, and that it continues over from freshman year, really identifying and pursuing strengths, skills, values, and interests is important, because it's that match piece. Students don't know what they don't know. So trying new things, whether that's student leadership organization, an internship, volunteering, any of those avenues are good ways to find new things out about themselves that they did not yet know. The other piece that will become a critical touch point for sophomores is by the end of sophomore year, before they register for junior year courses, they will need to have chosen a major. We offer, with academic services, a variety of workshops. We have one actually coming up in the next week to help students identify how to make a decision to choose a major, and then actually help them make the decision about what major is a best match for them. You will hear a variety of students. I'm a fan of choosing one major, but you will hear a variety of students at Brandeis talking about double majoring. That shouldn't cause you tremendous anxiety. It is very common at Brandeis for students to choose double majors, sometimes because they like so many things they can't decide. But the majors are designed at Brandeis to be combined. And so that is part of the intent in some of the designs of the majors. There are a few exceptions to that, but most majors are actually designed so that you could easily double major. You could change your mind. I've had seniors change their mind about what major they'd like to pursue in senior year and still finish in 4 years. And a vast majority of our students complete their degrees within that 4-year time cycle, even if they've multiple times have changed their major during that process. The other piece is that career exploration piece, and as I mentioned, I'll speak about internships in a moment in greater depth. But that piece to try out different roles, we've had students that were convinced they wanted to go a particular career path until they actually tried it and then decided it wasn't for them. And vice versa, students that tried things, they're like, I don't know, I'm going to give this a try, and really found a true love for a particular career field. I don't believe there's one answer to the question of major or career. I believe for most students, there are many majors that are lovely options for them based on their strengths, and that is true for careers as well. And so students can't make a wrong selection when they're choosing major or career. Our students, I often get questions about, aren't some majors potentially paid more than others in aggregate? Or is someone more likely to get a job after graduation in business, for example, versus philosophy? Poor philosophy is often picked on. It's actually a highly desirable major for employers. It's often sought after. So I'd like to change its rep. Personally, I was an English major. I have relocated many, many times in my career, and I've been just fine. Those communication skills come in awfully handy. When we survey employers about what they really are looking for in employees, they talk about critical skills like decision-making, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, etc. They usually actually don't list major, nor does our system really screen out majors for different job opportunities. So for sophomores, again, great opportunity that then and through junior year to really push the envelope on what it is they might want to do and give it a try.
Andrea, we have a question from a listener, a couple questions about fellowships, just before you move on from the timeline. Can you give some details on what fellowships are, what different industries they are available in? And then also we have another question related to that, in that it lists considering fellowships their junior year, but this parent is interested specifically about research fellowships, and that is it possible to look for good internships and fellowships for the summer after your sophomore year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So fellowships are an interesting creature. So I'm going to deconstruct fellowships a little bit. Fellowships as an umbrella term is funding to do something. So then there are different categories. So fellowships themselves are funds that are imparted to, in this case, your student to do something. Now, there are different kinds of fellowships. So one specifically to your question, research fellowships are one kind of funding available to students. There are also fellowships funding for things like unpaid internships, as well as travel and other kinds of engagement in the workplace. So to that end, research fellowships, when I talked about fellowships you'll see in the junior timeline, there are post-graduation fellowships, so fellowships you would do after you graduated from college, whose timeline begins junior year. So when you think about the Truman, there's a whole bunch of fellowships out there that the prep actually for them, if you're deciding to do that after graduation, takes place junior year. And I would put those in sort of these macro kind of famous fellowship categories. There are fellowships available throughout a student's educational career. And that is usually smaller. That's not, full-time work or full-time research, but is research for the summer, funding for internships during the summer or during the year, occur in many different locations. So, for example, for Brandeis specifically, we have on the Hiatt Career Center page a page for funding, and that actually connects to all funding sources, including funding for research fellowships. Our Office of Fellowships and Research does have funds and grant funds for undergraduate research, and a student certainly could apply during sophomore year for summer of sophomore year. That usually takes place in the semester before. So that application usually takes place in the spring semester prior to summer are the deadlines for that. So they're coming up early next semester for research funding from Brandeis. There are external funds as well, and we have a link. There's a guide to grants to individuals that also documents all the external fellowship and research fellowship opportunities beyond Brandeis. Again, within Brandeis, our best resource actually, we're the holder of that information, though we are not always the granting organization of fellowships. Those are housed on the Hiatt Career Center page under funding. If you go to our homepage under funding, you will find those resources. So certainly students could apply sophomore year, junior year, and even senior year to those kinds of funding sources for fellowships. Other questions?
I think we are getting other questions in. We do have one specifically about campus recruiting.
Certainly.
So could you expand on what that means? So does that mean just looking at what types of jobs are offered, or actually applying and interviewing? And if it's the latter, for summer positions, when are companies looking for students to fill those, whether it's an internship or full-time?
Yeah, that's a fantastic set of questions, really. So let me break that down a little bit. So organizations, and I'm going to remind you of the previous part of the conversation, the organizations that participate in campus recruiting, and those are organizations that come to Brandeis, literally come to Brandeis, and recruit our students or recruit exclusively for a position from the Brandeis pool of students. And so campus recruiting in and of itself, and there's some, I'll get into more of it when I'll talk about seniors. Organizations post positions and internships with us regularly. Our system that manages those opportunities, whether the employer is coming to campus or not, is called Be Hired. The software behind that is called Handshake. So we call it Be Hired, powered by Handshake. Students often use that vocabulary interchangeably in case you hear them speak about it. That system is where we house all the opportunities. Clearly, the opportunities that are closer to home, so opportunities shared by parents, shared by Brandeis alumni, or shared by companies that are exclusively looking to hire Brandeis, are most prominently listed on that particular system. But it also houses literally thousands of postings from around the country, so it's very field diverse and geographically diverse opportunities located or housed, I should say, in Be Hired. For those folks that are doing specifically campus recruiting, there are a variety of ways engaging. One is to have your resume uploaded and profile filled out. The students to do that in Be Hired allows companies to find them for campus recruiting. Companies may also come on campus to do informational interviews, information sessions, or actual interviewing for positions. There's another way in which they engage with us as well outside of campus recruiting that does kind of education and mentoring of students for those fields. An organization in part of campus recruiting may also do a resume collection. So they may say, you know, I'm looking for students that might be interested in being a paralegal at my firm, and they will actually then search through the Brandeis student resumes and profiles for students that are interested in law and paralegal, and then potentially reach out to them to interview for particular opportunities. Okay, so the other piece, so as we talk about, again, sophomore and junior year, I do take often together because they are intertwined. Junior year, really at the latter end of the stage, is a great time to look at graduate school exploration. Applications and tests required for graduate school vary depending on the type of graduate school a student is interested in. We're very concrete with students about graduate school. Graduate school is not an automatic degree. It is a means to an end. And so when we talk to students about graduate school, and that includes law school, we really talk to them about what is it that you would like to accomplish that graduate school will allow you to complete. versus going to graduate school for graduate school's sake. A majority of folks now take time off between undergraduate and graduate school to get work experience or develop other professional skills or take time off. And so graduate schools are no longer, with a couple rare exceptions for very particular PhD programs, graduate schools aren't expecting students to go straight through as they may have historically. And so that piece about really knowing why you're going to graduate school, those questions are best asked junior year so that in senior year you can actually pursue those applications. We're also looking for students to really push themselves in building more professional skills and engaging with employers and alumni more extensively, both through recruiting, through professional skill events. And for those that are considering, as I mentioned before, those national fellowships that take place post-graduation, junior year is a time where that starts. There are many of those programs that have an extensive year-long application process that takes place senior year. And so to not have thought about it junior year puts you very behind if you're only thinking about it in senior year. There are other students that are going to be much further along in their application and sort of reflective thought process to be successful senior year. So it's really great to think about that junior year. And for senior year, it really is that launch. Hopefully students have thought about career fields at that point. They've identified their strengths. They're able to articulate themselves well to their chosen audience. And they really are in a great position to then launch themselves into that application material piece of full-time opportunities.
So before we move on to the next slide, Andrea, we do have a question here about sophomores. So through sophomore year, students, in terms of their coursework, are fulfilling a lot of requirements.
Sure.
So in the midst of all of that, how might they go about pursuing their strengths and interests? And this of course extends outside of academics.
Sure.
To student clubs and volunteerism and things like that.
Great, thank you. The great question. So that general education, thank goodness for general education requirements, I have to say, because that in some ways forces students to go outside sort of their original stereotype of themselves and really pursue coursework and engage in coursework in different ways. And so whether that's they're taking coursework in the arts or humanity or sciences or social sciences, whatever it is that they're pursuing, each and every one of the classes they're taking is pushing them to use their skills in a different way and apply them in a different way. So even, for example, let's say they're taking feminist thought in literature class. That class will really push them on their writing skills, their analytical thought, and their research. And so those are skills being taught in that class, even if they should go on and decide they want to be a psychology major, or they decide they want to be a physics major. Those skills are still holding from all the courses, each and every one of the courses that they're taking. And of course, your student is also involved in other things. I can't remember what the current percentage of time spent in the classroom, but I know it's a minority of students' time. And so the things that they do around volunteering, student leadership, internships, on-campus work, or off-campus work are really critical components of how they understand themselves and what skills they develop. It's very common for sophomores to take pretty critical leadership roles on campus within student organizations. And that's a fairly unusual thing for Brandeis as a campus, that so many sophomores are heads of organizations. And for sometimes better and as well as stress, they find themselves in sort of equivalents of management positions and managing other students towards a particular goal or for a particular event. And that is a fantastic way for them to develop those professional skills that employers are then seeking. And what's nice is, given that a significant percentage of the junior year students study abroad, then those sophomores really are able to take those leadership positions really quite early in their time at Brandeis because there's seniors and sophomores. Professional skill building, I know I mentioned that previously. I just wanted to articulate specifically when I talk about that, what we're talking about in Hiatt. And we work with students both one-on-one as well as through workshops on these particular professional skills while they're here. And so I won't go into them in great detail. It really is about students being able to articulate their professional selves, identify their professional skills, and then be able to articulate that well and effectively with diverse kinds of employers and organizations. And so some of the events I'll speak about later, we believe in face time. I don't think as much as we talk about the electronic world and how many postings are online, etc., I don't think anything beats the sort of platinum standard of being able to speak to people face to face and articulate yourself well. So there are many events on really a weekly basis that we hold in Hiatt to help students develop those skills. And we bring in a tremendous number, and also thanks to Alexandra for her work bringing in employers and alumni to campus to help students speak about themselves and find where they fit professionally and develop those professional skills. The deep piece, I know there's often questions around internships, and so I wanted to go into that. That's so critical in both sophomore year and junior year. Career fields range. There was a question about timing of internships, and so I'll talk about that here as well. We also got questions, so thank you for those of you that submitted questions around issues around paid and unpaid and how people find things from study abroad. So we'll talk about those pieces here. The resources that we have for students, and you'll notice all of these resources are online, and so I hope that assuages some of folks that have concerns about how one manipulates and pursues the job search while one is abroad. Our resources are online. We often, even for employers interviewing on campus, will ask them or ask other employers if they're willing to engage in interviews via Skype, so students who are abroad can find the time and the medium through which they can interview with employers for opportunities. But to understand sort of the setup of our resources, I'd just like to walk you through a little bit of what we had, and this is sort of a tip of the iceberg highlights. For students that have declared a major, so for those of you who have sophomores who've declared or juniors that have declared, we really break down for students the skills they develop by major. Because students are very accustomed to talking about their academic pursuits by their major name without articulating the skills they're developing as a result. So we actually have essentially a skills translator for them by major so that they can do that more efficiently and easily. We also illustrate for them alumni career paths and internships in their particular chosen field. And again, you'll receive this PowerPoint, so you'll have these links afterwards. That page is also interlinked with the Brandeis Internship Exchange. So it's sort of like a Yelp or a Travelocity for students to be able to talk about the internships they've had and their experience with those internships, good and bad. And that is a Brandeis-only platform where students would log in and be able to see, for example, all the internships fellow history majors have had, and be able to look at whether their experience was, what their experience was like, what kind of supervision they had, what kind of skills they built during that internship. So it's a lovely opportunity for students to actually support each other and get really good ideas about what internships might be a nice match for them. It also talks about paid and unpaid, so students are very honest about what kind of remuneration they've had in their internships. And so if your student is looking for for example, well-paid internship in a field, that's a lovely way to find that information from a fellow Brandeis student. For students that are still trying to figure out sort of what might be a match for them and they're building their understanding about what different career paths look like, we have a resource called Spotlight on Careers that really goes into depth, which is good for a beginning student trying to figure out what is a field like. For example, what is the difference between marketing and advertising? Because the students, as far as the student's concerned, it's one field. Or finance, for example, a student might say, I want to go into finance. Well, there's many specialties, hundreds of specialties within finance, and they don't know necessarily where they might fit. So Spotlight on Careers helps them dive a little deeper and get a little greater depth of understanding of their particular career field or what they might be interested in and what might be a match for them. I mentioned Be Hired earlier in the context of job postings. It also has our full event calendars, all our employer events, etc., housed there as well. And not to be limited by internships coming into Brandeis, we also have two consortia in which we are members. One is called the Liberal Arts Career Network, and the other is the National Internship Consortium. They have tremendous amount of internship and job postings. The National Internship Consortium is exclusively internships. The LACN database, the Liberal Arts Career Network, is both internships and jobs. But that allows us to add probably another 3,000-4,000 job and internship opportunities for students to peruse. And these are vetted opportunities that career centers have chosen to share with each other. Again, great geographic and field diversity available both in the Brandeis Internship Exchange, Be Hired, and LACN and NIC. And so again, thousands of opportunities out there. I don't encourage students to limit themselves to the opportunities that are posted, however. Many students have unique passions that they would like to pursue, and that is often best done directly with organizations that do that explicit kind of work that they do. So we had a student bringing together public health interests with her environmental studies major, and so there were very specific organizations we worked with her to target. She happened to be from New York, and so she was looking exclusively in New York for those types of organizations. So we worked with her on that search strategy, identified organizations that did explicitly that kind of work, and which were about 4 or 5 organizations within the city of New York. And then she reached out to them directly, not waiting for a posting, and secured an internship for that particular summer. So that is another set of strategy pieces we work with on students to really craft their own internship if they have those kinds of unique passions or things that they want to pursue, and they're putting multiple pieces together. As you may know, your students are multi-talented and have a variety of interests, so it's very common that we work with students on that specific kind of approach. Internships themselves, the good news on the paid versus unpaid story is that more and more internships, now that the economy has turned to the positive, more and more internships are paid. There have also been some very successful class action lawsuits brought by interns working for companies, where the companies had unpaid interns, and the interns successfully argued that they were critical to the success of the company, and their roles were not otherwise held by a professional staff member, and they were very successful in creating additional precedents in the workplace in work law that organizations pay their interns. And so we are not yet at a date and time that all internships are paid, even by for-profit companies, but I think that I'm optimistic that that day is closer, given some of these more recent legal rulings in the workforce. What organizations pay and don't vary by law. Nonprofit organizations are under a different set of laws of whether they do or don't need to pay an intern. However, many nonprofits will pay. And so if your student is particularly interested in a paid internship or wants to be paid well for an internship, I would recommend they start doing their search early so that they can take advantage of the full suite of opportunities, right? So the opportunities that are paid are often very popular because they are paid. And of course, organizations want to attract the best talent, and so they pay more. And so for students that are waiting to the last minute to pursue an internship search, the number of paid opportunities at that point is smaller because they've already been snatched up by folks earlier in the timeline. Specifically for the timeline, there are a few fields that are, I call them the kind of platypus fields, that recruit unusually early. And so included in that family of unusually early would be really the most competitive finance opportunities post-early, particularly in iBanking. I would include management consulting in the particularly early recruiting, and those positions in federal government that require security clearance that take a long time. So State Department, CIA, FBI, etc. Those internships have a very early recruiting, and that's this semester. Many of them now through we're early November. Really now through December is peak period for some of those unusually early fields. For a vast majority of fields and opportunities, the recruiting timeline will start at earliest sort of December, January, February. Those would still be considered sort of early birds for most fields. But certainly when we hit later February, March, April, May is massive. Our postings per day shoot up during that time period for internships. And so a bulk of students will be applying for those opportunities next semester, which is why they're thinking about their strengths and skills and coming in and engaging with the Career Center now is helpful because it allows them to narrow their search and really look at things that are helpful next semester. I often use the metaphor of a library. It's much easier to come to a reference librarian and say, gee, I'd like, I like fiction, I'm interested in mysteries, and I'd like, mystery writers that write about mysteries in the Boston area. And a reference librarian can very easily help you find that particular book. It's much more complicated to go to a reference librarian and say, I'd like a book, because they're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, we have thousands of books. And so if students can work now, so earlier is better, if they can work now on kind of thinking about what their strengths are and where that might be a match in the world of work, they will be much easier for them, both timeline-wise and ease in articulating themselves to employers come next semester. So that timing piece is important, and you can help encourage them in that way. Our signature programs, and it's just a quick highlight of them, really our most popular, we have a big industry night coming up in biotech. But in industry nights themselves are incredibly popular with students. Students have an opportunity to take part in a case competition to actually wrangle with an issue a real career field is addressing and get a taste of the workplace in that way. And then they get to do field-based networking with employers, alumni, and parents who are professionals in that particular field. There's a variety of them. They're fully posted on our website. Again, the next one coming up is biotech. But recently we've done human services and education, marketing, finance, consulting, as well as computer science. But again, they range throughout the year, and they're a wonderful opportunity for folks to get both experience and exposure to a field. We also have regularly, on a weekly basis, employer spotlights and information sessions about different organizations and fields. Career fairs, in the traditional sense, we don't have many of those left because they're not very effective. The one that is very effective, however, is we do just in time. This is just before summer. So if your student is a procrastinator and they were like, oh my goodness, I missed all the earlier deadlines, we bring in employers for just-in-time hiring for both internships and jobs. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention there's all kinds of summer opportunities that will be available through our winter events. So we have career and internship connection career fairs in multiple cities over winter break. And many of those opportunities come in that time period. So winter break is also a lovely time that students aren't otherwise engaged in coursework where they can really pursue internships and jobs.
So Andrea, we have a question here from a parent. So often I see college job fairs or recruiters on campus, but Brandeis isn't included among the colleges visited.
Yep.
What process do you use to set up fairs and these employers on campus?
Yeah.
And so if you want to talk a little bit about our employer relations team and how we do outreach both to target employers as well as through alumni and parent referrals.
Yes, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, very few companies recruit at a massive number of college campuses. So often what companies will do is they will have a handful of recruiters that recruit at very large, humongous universities, right? They're going to go to Michigan. They're going to go to, or campuses where a large number of students meet exactly what it is they're looking for. So the blessing and curse of Brandeis of having such lovely, diverse students is they have fantastically diverse interests. So the total number of students interested in one career field is potentially smaller. Folks that want to go into bioinformatics, for example, might be a smaller number than at a school that has a program for bioinformatics. That being said, we have a very strategic way of approaching that very issue. We have a employee relations team of 3 full-time professionals that constantly monitor both what fields our students enter as well as the fields our students are interested in. And they build bridges and partnerships with organizations to give our students a pipeline through Brandeis into those organizations. And that could be through the recruiting coordinators at that organization. Very often our foot in the door is through alumni and parents that work in those organizations and serve as pipelines or champions or connectors for us into those organizations. And that may evolve to a company then recruiting, and you see us on a list on a website, for example. And so actually that just happened 2 days ago. So 2 days ago, we officially became a target school for Goldman Sachs Technology Division. And that process to become a target school for a school like Brandeis that's proportionally smaller than other institutions was a multi-year process. A big shout out for Drew Gutstein, who's a Brandeis alum, was determined to make that happen and has recruited from Brandeis for many years and is just a fantastic partner. And really through that particular partnership, we were able to clearly demonstrate the high value Brandeis students and young alums bring to Goldman Sachs Technology Division. And as a result of being able to demonstrate that when recruiting year after year, we became a target school. We're probably an anomaly, school size-wise, on that particular radar screen. But those are the kinds of things. We do very targeted work with students and with employers. And we will also ask you potentially to help us in that process later on in the presentation. But that piece, again, super, super important. And I wouldn't despair in the slightest that we're not on a list of humongous universities. I would recommend that your student come in. And again, you can look at the organizations that have hired our students on our destination data, and you'll see either those same companies and many others on that list. So I wouldn't be concerned about that in the slightest. For networking and skill development, so I talked about some of the employer engagement we do. We work in a variety of ways with your student. And so if your student hasn't written a Wisdom Wanted ad, I suggest you suggest that to them. If you remember back, I referenced classified ads way back in the beginning of our time together. Wisdom Wanted is an opportunity for the student to essentially write an ad about what it is they'd like to learn. So what wisdom it is that they are pursuing. Wisdom Wanted then is published as a blog, and we also have essentially quarterly newsletters that go out to the alumni and parent volunteers who then respond to those ads. So whatever it is your student's interested in, or whatever it is they're confused about, or what they'd like to know more about, they can write an ad for themselves. So it's very less frightening for students than direct networking. It's a baby step for them. They can write an ad as vague or as specific as they'd like about what they'd like to learn. And then the volunteer community will reach back to them with answers to their questions and connect with them in that way. It's a lovely first step if your student is nervous about networking. We also have an extensive LinkedIn group called Brandeis University Career Connections that you are also welcome to join and partake in, that brings the student, alumni, parent, and wider Brandeis communities together for career professional networking. Again, I mentioned earlier, we do have alumni employer office hours, and many of those folks will hold informational interviews for students. So it's a nice opportunity for students to learn more. I did mention the Career and Internship Connection, also called CIC, events in various cities. Upcoming, those are, see if I get them all, DC, New York, Boston, as well as San Francisco. There's always one on the West Coast that alternates between LA and San Francisco. And we've had many students get lovely internships and jobs through that particular set of events. And speaking about how you can get involved.
Thanks, Andrea. So I am thrilled to be the manager of our career-related volunteer opportunities. And in the last few years, we've extended all of our alumni volunteer opportunities to parents as well. So Andrea mentioned that Wisdom Wanted program, our LinkedIn group. We have a number of ways where you can share career advice with current students, post open jobs and internships at your company, or at least connect us with your HR department. That's some of the best ways that we can get referrals into excellent organizations that want to hire students like ours. And then those networking events. We have networking events coming up in both Washington, D.C. and New York over winter break that we invite you and your student to join us at. There are also university-wide opportunities. For example, the admissions office is looking for volunteers to host prospective student interviews, as well as represent Brandeis at college fairs across the country. So you'll receive the link to all of this information, as well as attending a university event. Take a look at our Brandeis events calendar or at the alumni events calendar. Many of those are open to Brandeis parents and the full Brandeis community. So before we get to the last of your questions, and thank you so much, they're continuing to stream in, I have one last poll question for you, and that is, after hearing about some of these opportunities, would you be willing to be a career resource to current Brandeis students in one of these ways? Just quick yes, no, or maybe. And if you need to learn more, we'd be happy to send you more information on that. So I'll give you just a few more seconds to weigh in, and then we'll be glad to get back to the rest of your questions before we finish up this hour. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. There will also be an opportunity to share your interest in being a career resource in the post-event survey that you'll also receive.
All right, bring it on.
Okay, so the first, just a clarifying question, when will there be an event in San Francisco? That career fair is actually in LA.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it is the week of January 4th. So all of the career fairs across the country, the one in LA, Boston, DC, and New York, they're all taking place in that 1 week, January 4th through the 8th, I believe. We also have another question. One of my favorite topics is LinkedIn. What role does LinkedIn play in getting internships? Does Hiatt help students construct their LinkedIn profiles? And the answer to the first question is it plays a great role, not only in helping students build their brand and be searchable and findable by employers who are using LinkedIn to source candidates for jobs and internships. But yes, we also help them construct their LinkedIn profiles, both in, we offer workshops and webinars to that effect, as well as through in-person drop-ins and in-person appointments, or via phone or Skype. So we go through not only their profile building process, but also how to reach out to contacts appropriately and professionally, how to build your network, how to do research on companies through LinkedIn, as well as how to search for jobs and internships. Millions of jobs are being posted on LinkedIn now, so it really is an excellent resource. We have another question here, excellent one about athletes. So advice on the best ways for a varsity athlete to build their professional skills while they're spending so much time in their sport.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Actually, by virtue, we just had a fantastic athlete panel of alumni athletes during homecoming. So I hope your student was able to attend. Being an athlete in and of itself actually is a tremendous skill building experience. And there are many employers that one of the first things they'll say is that, I'm very interested. Do you have any athletes? I'm really interested in athletes. And also the athlete alumni community is extremely active in helping athletes both manage the timing during which they can do internships, because sometimes for those that have earlier practice schedules, their timing or availability over the summer is not the same as other students. And the alumni are wonderful about kind of building opportunities for them that meet their scheduling needs. The time piece is time consuming, and so we actually work with the athletics department for professional resources for athletics athletes specifically, because their time schedule is very demanding, and if we compare them to other students, someone may be a full-time student and a varsity athlete, and that's a massive time requirement in and of itself. And on the team, they have the opportunity to help coach other players move up into what are really almost professional positions as a manager or as a captain of a team over their 4 years in Brandeis. And so I would start by saying, if your student is a varsity athlete, they're already building some really extraordinary professional skills as a result of being an athlete. The other components around professional skills are things they can do. We have all kinds of things that they can do while they're on the bus, for example, or on the plane if they're going out for a larger meet, that they can work on for example, as Alexandra was talking about, their LinkedIn profile or their resume. Most of the resources that we have and the things we do can be accessed electronically. And we also work with students by phone and by Skype. And so even if it's a student, they update their resume, they send us an email for an email review of that resume, and then we email them back, is a lovely way of kind of mitigating some of the challenges that they're not on campus when they're on the road in competition. And so those pieces are fantastic. And our athletes have been extraordinarily successful in gaining employment after graduating. As I've said, we've had employers that come sometimes specifically to recruit athletes.
So we have two more questions here that a couple different people have had. The first is about community service experience. It was a big part of the student's high school experience, in part because it was required, but also because of interest. How important is that now for hiring? We know colleges look at that a lot, volunteerism. How important is that for hiring now, especially as the student is focusing on academics and debate and mock trial and all of the other things that are pulling students in a million different directions? So is community service a must-have for hiring?
Yeah, and I would say students building professional skills is the must-have. So I'm going to break that down a little bit in that context of that question. So the piece about if a student is doing volunteering and through that volunteering they're building important career-related and professional skills, then volunteering can be critical in a job search, in that that's the context in which the students have developed that skill set the employer is seeking. Volunteering in and of itself, just to say that you volunteered, you didn't develop any skills, you didn't do anything new, you didn't, stretch yourself in any way. So it's kind of volunteering for volunteering's sake. Employers, I often speak to students about employers, including myself when I'm hiring someone. I'm a very selfish employer. I'm hiring someone to get the job done, to make my life easier, and have the skills they'll need to be successful. Do I think some of the other add-ons, like whether it's volunteering and that kind of thing, are nice? Yes. I don't know that would get someone exclusively a job or prevent them from getting a job. So again, if it's something they feel passionate about, lovely. But it's not required in the same way you're thinking about sort of a checklist for things you need to have for college.
Okay, Andrea, so we are at 1 o'clock, but I think we have time for one last question that I've gotten from several parents. And the first is, that question is, how does a junior spring semester abroad affect the job search? And, this is kind of similar to the athlete question. If a student isn't physically here, what can they do?
Yeah. And we have so many students studying abroad that we plan for that. So one of the things that we do is have all of any opportunity that we have, like a posting, a job or internship opportunity, they can apply on Be Hired. They can apply from abroad, and that happens all the time. We also have adjusted counseling schedules, and so someone might do what is an 8 a.m. our time or a later night counseling appointment because it better matches the time zone in which they are residing or in which they're studying abroad. We also do things electronically with students as well, and so a student being abroad does not preclude them at all from participating in the job postings, the career counseling, career advising. We also offer a variety, including this one, of webinars that students can partake in. And so, again, they could log in or watch the recording whenever is appropriate for their time zone and work that around their whatever their busy schedule is while they're doing study abroad. We do specific outreach with those students through the study abroad office as well, so we all know where we are. We know what time zone students are in. We know what kind of resources they've asked for. And we have a partnership with the study abroad office that helps us promote the opportunities we have specifically for study abroad students.
Wonderful. So I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Andrea, if you'll advance to our next step slide. So if I can ask all of you to just take a brief moment to fill out our satisfaction survey and let us know how we did. It'll also give you an opportunity to ask any additional questions you weren't able to ask today during this last hour. We also encourage you to register for upcoming alumni webinars. So we host career-related webinars every single month open to the full Brandeis community. We have one on networking coming up next week that we'd love to have you join us on. December's on what to do with a PhD. So here's our contact information for the Hiatt Career Center. Please feel free to be in touch. And again, join that LinkedIn group that Andrea had mentioned. Here's the direct link. And I know many of you probably heard about this webinar through the Brandeis Parents Facebook group, but we do want to let you know that that is available to you as well, not only to interact with other parents, but also to ask questions of other parents of upperclassmen to see what their students have done with their careers. It's really a great networking resource for you. So thank you again. Thank you, Andrea, for spending the last hour with us.
Pleasure.
And we hope to see you all on LinkedIn. Thanks so much and have a great day.